You're welcome to First Take. My name is Jifa Bampo. Today we are speaking with the Majority Leader in Parliament, the Honourable Osei Kyei-Mensah-Bonsu. Parliament is resuming a 9-week sitting before the year ends, and we need to know, what will they be dealing with? What will they complete? And what may potentially still be outstanding, as well as other topical issues of national importance. My name is Jifa Bampo. Thank you for joining us on First Take. Good morning, Honourable Majority Leader. Thank you very much for receiving us today.
Good morning, Jifa, and thank you for having me.
All right, so the third sitting of this first session of Parliament starts today. First, how was your break? Hope it was good.
Well, I'm not too sure it was. Depends on what we mean by good. I was really very active over the past 3 months and junketing from place to place and very little rest. And so you find me in tatters, and I guess I will be able to recover enough to be able to transact business for this meeting. So
it's a 9-week session, and we understand that a number of bills will come before the House.
That is so. Indeed, the number of the bills advertised exceed 50. But it's not possible, to be very realistic, it's not possible to transact business on all these bills that are intended for us to consider and pass, possibly. So, really, some are indicative. They are really to cause the engagement between the sponsoring ministries and the relevant committees and engender conversation around those bills, involving stakeholders, involving civil society organizations, involving the general populace. Because every now and then you have people saying that, well, we're not properly informed about bills that come to Parliament. So now we've devised a scheme where intended bills are advertised ahead of time. So anybody who has access to the agenda, which is a public document once it's launched, once it's unveiled, then the person would, apply himself or herself to the relevant bill that he or she might be interested in and have some conversations around it. So that's the purpose. But really, because of the very limited time, as you said, this meeting, the third meeting in the session, usually is dominated by the budget statement and economic policy of government. And that, of course, is going to be the state of affairs, because we do know that for the budget, it's time-bound. Once we are able, we cross December 31st. If it's not in place, government will be put in really a state of instability. You don't want that. So you want to finish the budget before the close of the year. But other things may also, those ones that we can handle concurrently, we will be able to do that.
Is it fair to ask that maybe as leader of government business, you would know what the specific priorities are of these, 50 bills that Parliament may have to deal with? Certainly there might be some specific items prioritized for action.
Don't forget, these 50 bills are not in Parliament. They will be coming. But there are some that are pending. The affirmative action came and got withdrawn and had to have further smithing, and that was in the first stanza of Akufo-Addo's administration. It's coming back, and I guess that is much more polished than the state in which it came the other time. So that one, and don't also forget that we also have outstanding a major bill, which is constitutionally obligated. I mean, the obligation is imposed on Parliament by the Constitution, which provides that as soon as practicable, with the unveiling of the 1992 Constitution, Parliament ought to have passed that bill.
What bill is this again?
The spousal rights. We haven't gotten to that, and that one is time-bound. Really, it's been a big struggle in Parliament dealing with that particular bill. And I know the Attorney General is further working on that. It shall have to come to Parliament. I'm not too sure that it will come this time around. Maybe the first meeting of the second session, that is into 2022. But these ones, and then the proper
human rights
and
Ghanaian
families bill. That one is in the House already. It's been it's before the relevant committee. If there is space, we'll deal with it.
Okay.
But because of the huge interest in the bill, we want to do what is appropriate. The committee itself, I believe, hasn't finished with it. Let's not forget that we have very, very limited time before us. So we'll see what time allows us for to transact. So we're waiting to see how far we can go.
There's a certain impression that it may be dealt with at the start here on Tuesday. Tell us what's going to happen starting Tuesday.
Let me be emphatic. It will not be done today. The reason is simple. And that is why, you see, you want to let people follow the processes and procedures of enacting legislation. And people will not have patience. And when you speak to it, oh, Kyei-Mensah-Bonsu doesn't want Parliament to transact business. Why? Because it's just been referred to a committee. That's the first reading. The committee then will go to sit on it and allow civil society organizations, allow religious groups who have shown so much interest, allow other groups, allow the general populace who have interest to express the interest appropriately, usually in memoranda. But there are some of them who would not encapsulate their thinking into any memorandum and then submit same to the committee. Some of them want to appear in person before the committee. The committee
that
has
will
not
be
concluded.
allowed?
That is allowed. The committee is allowed anytime. People don't, know this.
Maybe this is the first opportunity we've had to be
fully.
No, what I mean is, I know people submit memoranda for bills.
Yes.
But what I mean is, I think this is something that has touched the core of many sides, that they've been significantly involved. I understand more than 140 memoranda.
The thing really is, this is, I should say, the first private members bill that has really engendered so much interest. That one comes without question.
It's unprecedented.
But it's not, in fact, until recently, until just when Professor Okwei left the scene, Parliament, by the rulings of our speakers, were not positioned to initiate private members' bills, because the speakers interpreted Article 180 to mean that any bill that has any modicum of exacting pressures on the national kitty would not be entertained by the speakers. Okwei thought that there are some bills that may not necessarily impact on the national kitty. So those ones should be admitted. So now we are on a different, we are on uncharted waters where we are. So we need really to have a serious look at this. The Speaker has relayed the bill to the relevant committee. They have to come with their report. The report would include whether or not Parliament can do this alone.
And when you say whether Parliament can do this alone, what do you mean? That maybe the executive through the Attorney General needs to be more involved?
Could be involved. That is the explanation you want to give. And people say that, no, Kyei-Mensah-Bonsu is against it. They don't even understand the issue that you are raising. Look, what has become the Children's Act started in a similar way. Civil society organizations started something. They engaged relevant committees in Parliament. They engaged, at the time I was with the Youth and Sports Committee. They engaged us. They engaged the Chieftaincy and Culture Committee. I do recollect. I was not part of that committee. It was during the process of consultation, when the bill was really emerging strongly, that the then Attorney General, Obed Asamoah, intervened to say that no, he thought that it would breach Article 180, that it would exact, some impact on the national purse. And because of that, it may infringe, in his own consideration, he thought it would infringe Article 180, if it came from private members. So the state intervened and then engaged the sponsors. They had useful engagement and consultation, and the state then owned it. The executive came to own it and introduce him in Parliament. It's the reason why I was saying that could the Attorney General apprise himself of this, so that we don't enter into a terrain where perhaps maybe Parliament may think that because this bill has general acceptance, as to whether smithing it requires further smithing, right? It's another matter. But we are all united behind this. The issue
was
is...
it unfair, the critique that came that it seems majority members of Parliament had not vociferously declared...
Do you need to be vociferous on this? Do you need any loudness on this? If you agree, do you need any loudness on it? We are not even there, because the debate on the principles will happen in the House.
And that's where we will see.
And that is where we see. You see, unfortunately, there are people who jumped onto it, whether it was for populist affection or whatever. People in the House with respect, who when it comes to making laws, do not even engage. You don't even find them. And they are the people who turn around to criticize some of us who are often engaged in the smithing and crafting of laws. I thought it was most unfair, because we wanted to run the general populace through the processes and procedures, right? As I'm saying, is it the case that it may require the Attorney General to come in? Because we don't want a situation where after the event, somebody perhaps maybe takes the matter to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says that what Parliament did was unconstitutional.
At what point would the Attorney General then come in? Because as you've explained it, the memoranda has been submitted. Those who wish to appear before the committee will do so. The committee will put together their report. At what point would the Attorney General then decide whether this is something I need to intervene or have a stronger hold of?
Any committee to which any referral is made could, if they deem it appropriate, about the constitutionality of the law, of the bill before them, maybe of whether or not, because you see, you introduce a bill on account of a few things. One, maybe there's no law. You identify a mischief, right? And you want to deal with it, and you think that you should introduce a law to deal with that mischief. Sometimes you may have a law in place already, but that law may not be strong enough. Is it the case that you want to introduce another law, or you want to amend the existing law? Or maybe there's a plethora of legislations scattered. You want to consolidate everything, right? You want to seek the advice of the Attorney General on this, right? So that maybe you don't also end up conflicting laws that are existing already. The Attorney General has in his backyard a whole lot of lawyers who deal with this, who would so advise the Attorney General accordingly that, oh, okay, but for this we have so many laws dealing with it. They are not strong enough. We want to tighten the screws here and there. That could be one aspect. Or maybe let's introduce a new law. All these will come into the consideration if they engage the Attorney General. If the committee think that they can handle it, and don't forget that the committee itself is also populated with seasoned lawyers.
This is the Legal Constitutional
Committee.
The
Constitutional, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee. So they could, if they are clear in their mind that, oh, we think we can go on, we don't need advice of the Attorney General, they could go it solo and report to Parliament. But as I'm saying, every committee has the right to engage the Attorney General if they so wish.
Could it be fast-tracked? Seeing as many people want this bill and
well, it's not for me.
General acceptance.
It's not for me to make the decision. Fast-tracking of it will depend on what work the committee is able to do, and the committee, if they think that given the remit of the bill and given what they've heard and given what they've seen by way of memoranda submitted, if they've been able to peruse all the documents before them and they are convinced and persuaded that this is the way to go, they would provide advice. But I don't want to be seen to be stampeding the committee. Let's leave it to the committee to make that determination, and they will come to us. When they come to us as a house, we then determine how far and how fast we can go.
There's been some criticism that we already have laws against LGBTQ, and that what this new bill seeks to do is to specifically identify people and criminalize them by being identifiers. And I've also heard those opposed to the bill say that we already have these laws. Why do we need to create another one? I know you may not want to dig deep into which memoranda says what and the like, but what's the guarantee that there will be general fairness in looking at these memoranda in a dispassionate manner?
That is why I kept saying in the interviews that I held earlier that we should purge this debate of sentiments and emotions. And then that also forms the basis of another criticism of Kyei-Mensah-Bonsu. We don't introduce emotions and sentiments into the making of bills. It's the reason why in some jurisdictions they have two chambers, a lower chamber and an upper chamber. When maybe temperatures rise, the second chamber deals with the same matter after the passage of the bill by the first, or maybe the consideration of any matter by the first chamber. It goes to the second. They while away some time to allow some cooling off period, such that people then become much more balanced in the consideration of any matter. I think that, in Ghana, we don't have the luxury of having two chambers. We have just one chamber. Ours is unicameral. And it's for us really to make haste slowly and have a very balanced opinion about whatever comes to the House. And I think that ultimately we should situate any bill that we craft within the ambit of the Constitution. We should situate any law that we make within the ambit of the Constitution. Other than that, any law that we make, to the extent that it may end up being inconsistent with the Constitution, could be declared null and void. We don't want that. And that is why I'm saying that we need to join ranks with civil society organizations, with all the groups that have expressed interest, with the general populace, with any organized group, plus also maybe what advice that we have from the Attorney General's Department, and move in unison as a nation. Because, as I keep saying, I don't know of any ethnic group in this country that supports this issue about gayism, lesbianism, and so on. I don't know. My upbringing, I'm a Kan, I'm Ashanti, I'm a Kwabreman, and I was brought up by my parents and grandparents in, strict, traditional strictures. I'm a Christian by religion. My Christian upbringing also has contributed to shaping my own values in the system. But as an Akan, as a Ghanaian, I have my own values. Jifa, I want to believe that you're by Jifa, your Jifaness, you are Ewe, right? I'm not too sure that any small group, any clan within the Ewe setup would support lesbianism and gayism. It's about how to craft the bill. The devil, they say, always lies in the details. So let's get it right with the details. As for the overall architecture, there's no division. We are united solidly behind this.
So what about the view that members of parliament are being blackmailed, politicians in Ghana are being blackmailed to rally behind this bill? Otherwise, the religious groupings will ask their membership, who constitute the voting populace, to vote against politicians. Is that also fair to politicians generally?
Jifa, I made the point that the making of laws should not be inspired by emotions and sentiments. I remain an Assemblies of God person, perhaps unrepentantly. I have no shame in belonging to the Assemblies of God. I know the values inculcated in me by the Assemblies of God denomination. And I have no regrets for that. I live with it, and I believe I'm going to die in it and for it. However, I don't think that the making of the law should be driven by Assemblies of God. Right? Let's be balanced in our thinking, right? And do what is needful for Ghanaians across board.
What about a question that we could, as a country, get sanctioned by the international community for passing a bill that infringes on individual human rights? Yes, the bill does not say anything, or our constitution does not say anything about sexual rights being a human right. That is clear. I mean, there was a whole hullabaloo 2 weeks ago about some members of parliament purportedly being denied visas because of the position they've taken on this bill.
Jifa, you are entering the realm of speculative adventurism. Let's pass the bill. I've told you that we'll do what is appropriate. In our dealing with the international community, the interests of Ghana should hold. We should consider the interests of Ghana. But the same constitution also says that we should also submit to international treaties. So there should be a careful balance. And that's why I'm saying that we are not there. Let's get there. But I believe that ultimately Parliament will do what is best for this country.
And you're watching First Take. Our guest is the Honorable Osei Kyei-Mensah-Bonsu, the MP for Swame, but most importantly, the majority leader in Parliament. We'll be right back. You're welcome back to First Take. So, Honorable Osei Kyei-Mensah-Bonsu, there was a group that has been quite active recently, youth group that started in a spontaneous way, Fix the Country. One of the things they're demanding now is a new constitution. And just earlier this week, the CDD in a position paper indicated that there will be the need for a new constitution. What are your thoughts about it as someone who leads government business? Is this even something on the minds of government at all?
I think you've heard me, and it's not because of what the Fix the Country people, CDD, is even saying. If you have been listening to me over the past 4 or 5 years of making this call, indeed, in the previous administration, the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs led this clarion call. And we had media engagements, we have civil society engagements, and we arrived at this conclusion that we need a new constitution. Undoubtedly, this constitution has served this nation for, if for nothing, stabilizing this country. You remember what happened in the Limanic era, 81, when we had strict presidential system, and the ministers, all ministers came from outside Parliament. And Liman had a budget presented to Parliament, and his own MPs voted against the budget. And it was because of petty jealousies and covetousness between the MPs of the PNP and the ministers of the PNP regime. The MP thought that they had fought to win victory for the party, and that they were sidelined, and the ministers were the people who were enjoying, and they were riding roughshod over the MPs. They would not even respond to their calls and so on. So when they brought the budget, was it Professor Kyei-Mensah brought the budget, it was jettisoned. And that really caused cracks within the front of the PNP, which enabled Rawlings to pass through one of those cracks to overthrow the administration. So with that experience, into the Fourth Republic, we decided to have this
merger system
hybrid. It has helped us to stabilize the ship of the state thus far. But I think that in terms of our pursuit of good democratic governance, it's proving to be a hindrance.
And this is because you have members in Parliament who are members of the executive, and sometimes the lines are blurred.
Not necessarily. After all, in the Westminster system, all ministers come from parliament.
Exactly.
And it works, and works to perfection. Indeed, my own preference is the Westminster system, not presidential system.
But what happens in,
the
in
reason
an
is,
environment which is polarized, and you have a political party that may not do well in a particular region?
Good,
and those
good. So if
issues.
we have, it's happened before.
Yes, it has.
The Progress Party,
yes,
period, when there was no member of the Progress Party
from the Volta
region,
and it was difficult to get.
So perhaps we could tinker with the constitution. That is, if we are going the Westminster way, to make that provision that in regions where a party is not represented, the Prime Minister may have his hand freed to appoint ministers from that region to come, because we should all belong. The Constitution, don't forget, provides that in recruiting into public office, we should have consideration of regional balance. If we don't do that, we don't have regional balance in that. But then this then must be inspired by the Constitution, that the president's hand must be free. That's if we are going Westminster. And my preference is the Westminster because, you see, in the Westminster system, the leader of the party in parliament that wins the election becomes the prime minister. It's not because I'm the majority leader.
That you
but
want
you see,
to be
it
the
encourages people, experienced people, to enter parliament so that the nation will have the services of that vast array of professionals. That's number one.
But
number two,
you have seen the list of members of parliament. You have a vast array of individuals.
I'm talking about experience. I'm talking about experienced people.
So for you, the attrition rates in our parliament is part of the problem.
We'll come to that. We'll come to that. So I'm saying that if we had the Westminster system, it attracts the vast array of professionals, experienced people, to come to parliament. Here, in the presidential system, people think that, oh, let me show my face to the president or the presidential candidate. If he wins, then maybe I could make a minister. But if you're not careful, you know, the nation becomes shortchanged because corners will be cut to satisfy those people. In the Westminster system, you don't have that. It's experienced members of parliament who become ministers. The person would have been a shadow minister for maybe donkey years, 8 years, 12 years. When his party wins, then he comes along as a minister for maybe water resources, minister for finance, minister for works and housing. He stayed in the shadow for so long, such that he knows everything in the ministry, right? And he is an authority, more or less, in that sector. In the presidential system, the strict presidential system, it's technocrats who are made ministers. They know their field very well, consultants and technocrats. Here we have this misgrail, and because of the imperatives of the Constitution, which provides that the majority of ministers should come from Parliament, the President makes members of Parliament ministers.
But is that what the Constitution says? As I recall, the Constitution says it should not be less than 50%.
That's what I'm saying, that majority.
But it's us who have made it majority. Nothing stops us from sticking.
50% plus one is majority.
Oh, but it's more, usually it's more than just the 50%.
No, I'm saying, no, but
yes.
The Constitution doesn't establish any ceiling.
Exactly the point.
That is
so
why.
That doesn't necessarily mean that it should be 70% of MPs who become ministers.
I've never seen the situation where 70% of MPs have become ministers. But I'm saying that, you see, the President will want to satisfy the regions. So he has one minister from this region. He thinks that you should also have another minister, MP minister from this other region. That's how it goes.
What about the capping of Supreme Court judges also, for instance?
It's something that we have to contend with.
We should.
I think that there should be a ceiling, honestly. I think that there should be a ceiling, just as I think there should be a ceiling on the number of ministers. And I think that if we have to going back to the issue that you raised, if you have to go to the presidential, right, we should also then go to strict presidential and let the president have a free hand to appoint all ministers from outside. I said that this hybrid has served a purpose in stabilizing the state. But where we got into, I think we must let the separation of powers work.
So whose responsibility would it be to start the process for an entirely new constitution, not the amendment?
We have. My ministry started this process about 3-4 years ago. And we, in fact, by this, the program for this year, we even have it to continue on what trajectory that we established for ourselves, and we are pursuing that to its logical conclusion. You see, the Professor Mills's CRC, in my view, was really, even though perhaps he had very good intentions, the very way of prosecuting it, I had a difficulty with. I think where we are, if you come to Parliament, we've practiced the Constitution since 1993, right? We've applied it and we have gotten to know the difficulties. And then from that, we can have what I call a sovereign national conference to deal with this, so that every segment of society will come and, address or relate to the Constitution what they think are the drawbacks in the Constitution. Once we are able to do this articulation, I don't want a one-day national conference. Perhaps it could span for 1 week or 2 weeks.
And it could be a regional activity.
Then we could strand out these critical issues. And then from that, we could have whatever, a consultative assembly or constituent assembly, representing the cross-section of the Ghanaian society, right? And then we could come up with a holistic constitutional review. When we have done that, in my view, we'll subject that constitution, that new constitution, to a referendum. If it passes, it replaces this one. And that is why I think that it should be holistic. It should be holistic so that it becomes once and for all matter. And if we decide to go the Westminster way, the whole character and contours of the Constitution will change. On the other hand, if we want to go presidential, as I said, now the thinking is that if we want to go presidential, let's free the hand of the president to appoint ministers, all ministers from outside Parliament, right? So again, we have these two positions. Whatever happens, we don't want the current situation to prevail. Because you see, today, in Parliament, it's difficult to really have Parliament perform the oversight function. Why? Because those of us in government, sometimes it's difficult, human as we are, to look over your shoulder. Something is coming from the executive and you are able to frontally confront it. I mean, it's been like that. Even in opposition, people are afraid to criticize what is coming from outside Parliament, right? Because, hey, if we come back, these are the movers and shakers in the party. If you criticize them, they may blacklist you, and if and when we come to glory, they may decide to overlook me. We don't want that. So these are things that we really confront on a daily basis. And then you see, in the Westminster system, this peer review mechanism, if you want to fight corruption, I think that is the way to go.
All right.
Because I know Jifa in Parliament. I know Jifa's worth. I'm talking about, for instance, how many houses Jifa has before she became the Prime Minister. Jifa cannot, within 4 years after she becomes the Prime Minister, maybe 4 years, he is able then to have 4 or 5 buildings. It will be unacceptable. And the peer review will nip you. So really, it encourages more transparency and accountability. Mm-hmm. So as I'm saying, my preference is the Westminster. People may think otherwise, and those of them who also think that we must go the presidential way, most of them also think that in that case, let's free the hand of the president to appoint ministers from outside Parliament. Because we are not moving forward as much as we want to move as a nation because of this whole constitutional arrangement, having square pegs in square holes. Oftentimes, there are many square pegs in round holes because of what we want to achieve. And that is not really helping us to grow and grow our nation and to have the fast development that we want this nation to experience.
We've been speaking with the Honorable Majority Leader, Osei Kyei-Mensah-Bonsu. We take a quick break and we take the final part of our discussion. You're welcome back to First Take. Our guest is the Honorable Majority Leader, Osei Kyei-Mensah-Bonsu. So, Honorable Mensah-Bonsu, there are few outstanding issues from the last Parliament. For instance, the Second Deputy Speaker decided to defer a decision on the report on the Sputnik V. Is that something that we will see action on in this third session?
Well, certainly, because we had finished the debate on the motion, and he needed to have put a question on it. I myself, really, I could not understand why he deferred the question, because we had a report, we had debated a report, and the motion was to the effect that we adopt the report. If we adopt the report, then the necessary consequences will follow. If we did not adopt the report, what was going to be the next step? Because some people were arguing that the committee did not have enough time to go into the depth of the matter that had been referred to them. Is it the case that we're going to instruct the committee to go back and continue, or what? To me, the decision was simple. Unfortunately, it looks like the presiding officer was given some advice by his advisors, and he did what he did.
Isn't it really because the health minister was under a lot of pressure, and the leadership in opposition wanted a certain pronouncement on the health minister following the revelations from the Sputnik?
What pronouncement?
That he had erred, and that he
violating
the Procurement Act. They wanted a certain responsibility being held on him, and so the decision was deferred because of the controversy.
As far as I'm concerned, there was no controversy. There was a motion before us. What was the content of the motion? That this House adopts the report of the committee that had been set up by the House to go into the procurement of the Sputnik V vaccine. Is that what it is? And the committee had made their own recommendations, observations, and conclusions. So if we voted yes, we're adopting the report. If we voted no, it would have meant that some consequential action or directive will come from the speaker. That, okay, maybe it means that you have not satisfied your charge. Perhaps you didn't go deep enough, so we are referring it back to you. Or maybe we set up another committee. The options were clear. But the point being made is that because that decision is outstanding, we have to go back to it for the question to be put on the adoption of the report. I remember along the line, the Honorable Muntaka, for instance, wanted the minister to be sanctioned.
It was not part of the terms of reference.
Absolutely. And that is what I referred him to. That is not part of the terms of reference. And
was that a mistake?
I don't know. Because you are asking the committee to deal with it. You can't just start and charge the committee to
take a certain action.
It will depend on their own conclusions, observations, and conclusions.
But was that a mistake?
It was
that
not
the health minister would not face any specific action. And I know that there was a strong defense put up by the Honorable Kyei-Mensah-Bonsu,
yes,
who pointed out that that the health minister was taking these actions in a bid to save lives. Many people were dying. There was a huge threat to our healthy populace and the like.
I think there were other matters,
yes,
that were raised. That as a nation, did we have to go through
the parliamentary process,
an individual intermediary, right,
And also,
in the
should we
procurement
have
of it.
ignored the AG's advice?
So
this
those
will
are
come to
matters.
Parliament
Those are
under a
matters.
certificate of urgency.
Those are matters. And then Muntaka, for instance, was trying to raise when I pointed out the defects in his own contribution. He then he came back and wanted to then submit a counter motion that the MESA should be sanctioned.
Is that still possible under this?
No, because you see, you can't. The motion before us
is to adopt the report.
The
or not
motion
to adopt it.
was submitted on account of a motion that had been made in the House, and that motion was a motion on notice. It had been advertised. The Speaker had accepted it, had been advertised, and on account of that, we set up this committee that had come with a report. You cannot come by a motion without notice to arrest a motion on notice. So technically, I said, look, you are not dealing with the standing orders. You think you can do your own thing. It's not accepted here.
So that circumvention of the process cannot happen.
It cannot happen.
This comes
but
back
if we think,
time.
if we think that the committee could not, under the circumstances, do a thorough job, I want the committee to go back and deal with outstanding matters. We could charge them to do that. Or if you say that we want another committee, so be it. But the motion before us is the adoption of the report of the committee. Yes or no? Do we adopt it or do we not adopt it? If we adopt it, then we submit to the conclusions of the report, right? If we don't, and we charge, and then the necessary consequences may have to follow to set up another committee or whatever. Okay? So to me, that is what we must do. But the question is still outstanding. It's going to be put. So I guess between this week and next week, it's going to be really difficult to find space.
But
the third week,
certainly
the question will have to. We can't leave it hanging.
All right.
We have to make a decision.
But a lot has happened since the Sputnik V debacle. We've had a lot of vaccines come in, for instance. Many more people have received their second jab. But I don't.
Have you had your second jab?
Yes, I have, sir.
Yes,
and I'm wondering, will there be a process of accountability for these other vaccines that have come in? Whether they are by donation or by procurement.
It's a life and death situation. Notwithstanding, we need to have... Governance is about transparency and accountability. It's about being put in charge of national affairs. And as a government, you need to account to your people. So accountability is part of governance. I don't see anything wrong with that.
Okay, and the budget is usually a big issue. Budget for 2022, we've seen what has happened throughout the year with the mid-year, and at that time we had missed a bit of our financial targets in terms of what we expected in revenues. And then there's also pressure on the public purse. Young people have been looking for jobs. The finance minister says the public sector payroll is full. What are your expectations for the 2022 budget when the finance minister comes to present? And I know usually he will do that sometime in November.
Yeah, it's coming on the 17th of November. And the COVID environment really impacted negatively on the economies of all countries the world over. And it should not be made to appear as if it was only Ghana. People talk sometimes very scurrilous language about our own performance. But in the sub-region, if you're talking about GDP growth rate, among 16 countries, Ghana placed fourth. There were only 3 countries that did better in the COVID situation, COVID environment than we did. But the countries that did better than Ghana in terms of GDP growth, Benin, which country? I think Sierra Leone and Niger. These 3 countries that did better than us did not do what we did in terms of, really holding livelihood, like what government did, free water, making people pay just half of electricity bills, and even the hot meals that were provided for those of them under lock, the communities under lock. Those people did not do that.
But we've had to pay more taxes in 2021. People who live in border areas continue to suffer economic challenges.
There are no free lunches. You know, government needs to develop. And development is on account of monies that come to government. So if your revenues have dipped, you need to really up your level of performance in revenue collection before you'll be able then to develop the country, at least to also cover the lost period. It cannot be lost to eternity. You must reposition the people of the country to a certain level of development. So, Jifa, in terms of tax revenue collection, we need to do more than we have done. However, I think the other thing that we have not managed to do very well as a country is broadening the net. You want your road to be paved. How is it to be done? You want water to be extended to your house. How is it to be funded? You want electricity to be taken to your doorstep. How is it to be done? Right? Today, I know the Minister of Roads, for instance, and local government, they are planning to bring a bill to expand the horizon and frontiers of the assemblies. That will allow the assemblies to be in charge of the development of roads within the communities. If the assemblies should do that, they can't depend on the common fund to do that. The common fund is already oversaddled. They will need to fall on these taxes from the markets, from lorry parks, from property owners. That is what is going to help us to develop our country and our communities. Until we live up to that, we'll not be able to do anything. Those of us in leadership, we're having a discussion about the imperilment of the road fund, for instance. And we're saying to ourselves that since the days of President Mills, road tolls have not been increased. President Mills increased by about 900% from 10 pesos to 1 cedi, right?
Yes.
And since those times, 11 years on, we have not increased. Some people are of the opinion that, okay, let's increase it by at least maybe 500% to about 5 or 6 cedis. Others think that, well, these are difficult times, so why not freeze it for the time being? When do we do that? When is it going to be the most appropriate? Because at any given time, people are in hardship. The other thing is,
the thing
people
about
in
the road
Accra
tolls is that people say that the road is tolled, but they don't see the impact of the monies collected on that specific
when
road.
President Mills
the
increased,
perception is that it is diverted for other
when
activities.
President Mills increased it, the same issue came. Hey, there was hue and cry. I was a minority leader then, and I said an overnight increase by 900% was too hurtful. I spoke to it as well. But then, the following week, we saw what was happening in Accra. Bulldozers, asphalt plants moved to really do spot improvements in the roads. And then people said that, okay, if this is what really is going to be useful, then we may have to accommodate it, even though we think that it's too hard and too harsh on us. People then froze their criticisms. But 11 years on, that increase, peters off into insignificance. What do we do? So people are talking about automation if we have to do it. Others are also saying that, well, I'm in Accra. I want to drive on asphalted roads. So if I don't go to Tema, I don't pay anything. Is that justified?
No.
So people are saying that, okay, in that regard, and if somebody has to drive all the way from Tamale to Accra, he encounters about 10 toll booths from Tamale to Accra, paying, just driving one day. And the person who is in Accra driving on asphalted roads doesn't pay anything. Is that justified? So others are saying that, okay, in that case, let's not even talk about the booths anymore.
So this is really about looking at the model.
The models. People are even saying that, look,
improve it.
Pay as you go. You buy diesel or petrol. You're going to put in your vehicle to drive in Accra, to drive in Kumasi. On asphalted road, you must pay something for the maintenance of the roads. And then in that case, you free the highways of booths. That's also another option. We must think through to see what is best for us as a country.
Okay, so finally on the economic bit, so the finance minister will come in on the 17th.
On the 17th, and
November,
as you do know.
And you're hoping, what are some of the critical things that you would like to see in the 2022 budget? Because yes, you've talked about our difficult circumstances, but of course, if we want to see an improvement maybe in 2022, knowing that we have a 300 a billion debt as a country, what are some of the things you want to see? There's cares of Batampa. Some say they've not seen the full extent of the impact of
I think that you mentioned Batampa. The other day I was speaking to it. That is really to energize the system. But not too many people know it, even how to, source for the funds. So I think this time around, the finance minister should spend time to explain what it means, how to assess the funding to reinvigorate our various enterprises. And then you spoke about the national debt, which should really concern all of us. And the COVID situation hasn't helped. We need really to also develop much faster than we are developing. And as I said, in a can, in Kwanchen Adie Fa, Yedisika Neto, right? If we see strung along the road goods, wares that are on display, we need money to buy it. We need money to reinvigorate the system. And the money going and borrowing really is becoming a challenge that we must live up to. We must confront it.
So you would not encourage the finance minister to borrow more? No, we should at least pack the Eurobonds for now.
As where it is practicable to raise funding from the system, let's do that. But that will also mean imposing greater responsibilities on ourselves. GIFA will have to pay much more in property rates. You must agree to pay that. And a certain Kyei-Mensah-Bonsu will have to do the same thing. And Kumla, you have to do that. And that will if your landlord has to do that, it will translate into you having to pay a higher rent. Let's all agree that where we are, this is how we should pursue our development, right? And once we have that national consensus on the way to go, then we know that yes, as a country, we must impose on ourselves greater burden of raking in much more revenue. But at the same time, we should also spread the burden so that those of them paying now, especially those of them in public office, should not be overly saddled. So I'm expecting the finance minister. The president went round. Everybody is shouting about infrastructure. We need roads. We need hospitals. We need educational facilities. The other time in the Volta region, a chief was relating to this. We need money for that. How do we raise the money? We should agree as a nation the way to go. We don't want too much of debts by way of borrowing. We don't want that. Then we should come inside, do serious introspection. Where can we have monies from within the territories of Ghana as a republic to rake in more? And with that, we can really make giant strides in our national development.
My final question, and this has to do with the report made to the Privileges Committee by the Honorable Alassane Suhuyini, where he feels that the MP for Asin Central, the Honorable Kennedy Ajapong, had brought Parliament into disrepute following a commentary made about multimedia journalists and the company as a whole. That matter came to the Privileges Committee, but it seems there's been no forward movement. Will there be any action on that at all?
Once a referral is made to a committee, the committee must work on it and submit a report. So I don't know where they are now, honestly. So maybe I have to engage the chairman, who is a deputy speaker, to see what action has been taken on it. And then I know some other people have also raised issues about some of our colleagues who have made similar statements and so on and so forth. But as a house, we should look at these things to see that we move together. Committees in the house should not be politicized. We have seen recently that some committee members, using the name of some committees, have gone around, You see,
the health committee, the education committee,
no parliament behaved that way.
The minority members who've gone round.
No parliament.
You think they've done the wrong thing?
They've done the wrong thing.
But they've drawn attention to
they've done the wrong thing. You see, if you want to inject partisanship in committee work, you dilute the relevance of any committee coming to parliament to raise issues. We don't do that at committee levels. Let's hold together at the committee levels. And there, the hand of the whip is weakened at committee levels. Because you see, the greatest tool for the performance of oversight is the committee. If you inject partisanship there, you weaken parliament as a whole.
So if the majority members who form the leadership of the committee or the chairperson doesn't seem to be moving, what then?
The thing to do is for attention to be drawn to maybe lapses in the system, to the leadership of the committee. And you see, by our standing orders,
the leadership of the committee are the ones being accused. So do I bring it to leadership?
I'm saying, by our standing orders, a committee cannot act on any matter unless that matter is referred to the committee. What has been referred to those committees? So what you have to do, if you are a very diligent member of parliament, you can perhaps bring a statement to the House. Out of that statement, the Speaker then will make a directive that this committee should go and deal with this.
Okay, but that takes away
failure of that, whatever you're going to do outside, is of no relevance to Parliament as a House.
Okay, but that strays away from the question I asked about the Honourable Ajapong, because if this had been an ordinary member of the public like myself who'd fallen foul of Parliament, I would be hauled before the privileges, and I've seen lots of well-meaning Ghanaians who've had to sweat at the committee.
Yes,
so
and that's what I'm saying.
It's about fairness.
It's about fairness, it's about equity.
But we are talking about this particular case.
Yes, because if I just said that reputable people who are not members of Parliament, they were members who belong to a political party, who also fell foul, their conduct was referred to Parliament, and nothing happened.
So will we see something
I want us to be equitable.
This case?
Let's have a double-edged sword, which will cut both ways. That's better.
All right, so that's where we have to end it. The Honorable Osei Kyei-Mensah-Bonsu, many thanks for sharing your perspective with us on all these, major issues. We look forward to the next 9 weeks, and I'm sure we'll come back to you. Thank you.